have Shannon Davidson as our teacher this week. Shannon's been married for 34 years to Mark. She has a son and a daughter and a grandbaby girl back on the East Coast, or
Chicago.
Chicago. Well, that's
Midwest.
East of here.
East of here, yeah.
Shannon is the director of women's ministry here at the Shoreline, so I report to Shannon. She is a wonderful woman. If you haven't gotten to know her, she just has a heart for Jesus. And it's really under her direction that, if you haven't noticed it and you haven't been in one of our Bible studies before, I think this is like the 5th or 6th book that we've had, that this is written by women of the Shoreline for the women of the Shoreline, which is really awesome, because I've mentioned this before, that, you know, it's just so cool to have the teachers amongst our midst, and then they're just real touchable. They're us, you know, and so that just really makes it really special. And so I just thank Shannon so much for just providing the leadership in that, and guiding the teachers in that, and pulling that together. And so without further ado, we'll go ahead and have Shannon come up and give us a lesson. Oh, one more thing. So, no, never mind, I'll tell you this at the end.
Okay, can I snag that book?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it is. Good morning. It's fun looking at you guys. Just want to thank Debbie and all the leaders. It is such a joy for me to see God raise up so many amazing, godly women. We have an incredible group of women here. I mean, whether or not you're leading, I'm looking out at a lot of faces, and there's some amazing women in here. So I'm excited that you're here, and that you're going to be building some new relationships this fall through Bible study, and we're really trusting the Lord to do just a mighty work. And I didn't know if you knew, if the last song that we sang, was that new to some of you? Yeah, okay. It's actually our theme song, and it's part of the verses on the back of your book here. So we loved that. Of course, we loved the video, but your truth is the compass that points me back north. Jesus, my captain, my soul's trusted Lord, all my allegiance is rightfully yours. And that, in a nutshell, is what this fall is going to be about as we study the life of Paul. So I want to just jump right into today. I have 2 stories that I'm going to share with you, and one is a personal story, but I want to, let me just open in prayer really quick too. So Father, I'm just so grateful for the privilege, Lord, to be here just in your presence, Lord. Thank you so much for these women, and for the expectation, Lord, for what you are going to do in and through this study. Lord, we consecrate the study, we consecrate ourselves before you, and ask you, Lord, to just do all that you desire in and through us, Father. Just be in our midst this morning, Lord, and may I decrease and may you increase within me. We love you, Lord, in your name. Amen. So in the news about 2 weeks ago, I don't know if you guys heard, it was on August 24th, Antonio de la Rosa, a Spaniard, took off from San Francisco across the Pacific Ocean in a paddleboard. And he arrived on the shores of Oahu. So he arrived on the shores of Oahu, on August 24th. So he took off actually on June 9th. So 77 days he was out on the open water with only, no engine, but only his arms and the currents and the winds that went with him. He had no companion boat that went with him, so he had his supplies. He had to have all the food. He had about 90 days worth of freeze-dried and dehydrated food. You can see there that little front part of that is a cabin. It is a waterproof cabin, so he had this little sleeping bag in there so he could sleep. But he had his GPS, his satellite phone, and a desalination water system so he could have drinking water. And that's all he had going across the open ocean for those 77 days. Just to give you a perspective of that distance, if we started walking from here in San Clemente, if we walked 3,000 miles, that's about the distance it was. Does anybody know if we started off from here 3,000 miles where we would end up? The East Coast, any East Coast for sure. Well, that was safe. That was safe, Marianne. Yes, the East Coast, you're right. Boston, actually, 3,000 miles. So if we took off walking from here 3,000 miles, so that's the distance, San Francisco to Oahu, that would be. So out on the water by himself for all of those days. He had many sleepless nights, and the reason for that was because he had to get up every hour to do course corrections. He had to check his GPS because of currents. He couldn't, if he slept 6-8 hours, something like that, woke up, he could have been way off course. And then all the time and energy that it would take to get himself back on course would have been so much worse. So every hour, small course corrections to keep him on course where he needed to get to his final destination. When I was thinking about that, it sounded horrible, 77 days with just little bits of sleep. But I was thinking, how many times for us have we had sleepless nights trying to navigate decisions, financial decisions, relationship decisions, whether we should relocate, buy a house, sell a house, what we should do with our kids with regards to school, and all those kinds of decisions. Those can keep us up at night. And we're really trying to seek the Lord and to navigate which way we need to go with that GPS. And it's not a physical GPS that we would be seeking for those types of decisions, but we would be using more like a God positioning system, if you will, right? Where we're going to be praying and seeking the Lord for those kinds of things, because the Lord doesn't want us bobbing around on the water without direction, with our bearings off and things like that. He has a specific direction for us. He has a plan and a purpose for each and every one of us, and he knows exactly the destination that he wants us to get to, and he's going to equip us with everything that we need to get us to that place. But how often, I don't know about you guys, but how often do we go to the phone instead of the throne? Is our first reaction to make a call, get some counsel, which is not a bad thing. We need godly counsel. God has given us community to receive godly counsel. But what's our first go-to? Is it the phone or is it the throne? And when it's the throne, it's going to be clear. It's not going to send us in multiple directions. It's going to be just very specific. And either it's wait, stay the course, make an adjustment, that type of thing. Sometimes when we get so many different inputs, it can start to confuse things, and we can find ourselves a little bit in a fog and maybe losing our bearing. So when we go to the throne first, that one word that we get from God is going to be worth more than 10,000 words that we get from people. So just to encourage us, always let's go to the throne first for our God positioning system instead of going to the phone. Besides some of the different things that Antonio had to overcome, great waves, currents, coastal currents actually were one of the things that were very difficult for him. It's, if you can picture in an airport, the walkways, the people movers, picture that near the coast, kind of like that, where it's this one direction that the current is going really strong. And because of, I don't understand all the currents, my husband was trying to describe it to me and I was lost, but currents go a certain direction. And so with Antonio wanting to leave San Francisco, and because the current's going strongly south, and him on a paddleboard, it was very difficult for him to cross, to get out past the coastal currents into that open sea. Also, getting to his destination, the same thing near Waikiki, very difficult for him. So there were some days when he was out there due to currents. Some days he'd paddle 40 to 50 miles, and other days he'd paddle maybe 10 miles due to currents and things like that, and having to course correct. So great waves, heat and humidity he had to deal with. So there were many, many things that he had to deal with. But one of the biggest concerns that he had nothing really to do with the water or the waves or the ginormous like whales and things that he encountered. It was actually his battery. It was the battery that charged his GPS, his communication systems, and his water system. And the battery was charged by solar panels that were on his little boat called Ocean Defender. So he had these solar panels on the top. And so when storms would come and the sun wouldn't be out for days, the battery would drain. That was, as you can imagine, his biggest concern. Because if his satellite phone goes out, his GPS goes out, he's out there, this little boat in the middle of the Pacific, and that would not be a good thing. So that battery was critical. So having the sun out to charge the solar panels was so important, because the sun would charge the solar panels, which would in turn provide battery power for the battery, which in turn would then help his give energy or power to his GPS and his phone and the water system. And just like us, as much as for the solar panels needing the sun for the battery to be powered, for us, we are like that solar panel. We need the sun, the SON, for us as well. Critically, we need that. And not only for our GPS, but just for the filling that we need, for the power that we need to endure the trials and just all the things that come our way. We need to be filled. And direction comes as a result of that. But it's first having that direct connection with the sun and getting filled that way, getting charged up that way. And there's a progression, just as the sun to the solar panels that then powered the battery that then was useful for his GPS and all of that. There's a progression for us as well that we can kind of relate this to. And I was thinking about, I don't know if you guys, last year for women's Bible study, or for women's ministry overall, we had a theme for the year. It was deeply rooted. Do y'all remember that? And it was from Ephesians 3, 19 through 21, and, 16 through 19. And I just wanted to read it quickly for you. So Ephesians 3, 16 through 19. I pray that out of his glorious riches, he, being Jesus, may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with all the saints, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. Did you kind of catch that progression? That you may be strengthened with power. So strengthened with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And then it's being rooted and established and grounded in love together with all the saints. I just love that, and I just feel like that's so speaks to, for us, having that connection to the Son. It's through his Spirit that we're going to have the power that we need together with all the saints. It's not, Antonio was out paddling by himself out in the water, out in the ocean. But you know what? We're not paddling alone. We have people going in front of us who've already made it to the destination successfully. We have some that are just a little bit ahead of us, some alongside of us, and some that are behind us. So we are in it together. So just an encouragement. during Antonio's journey, he encountered multiple storms and hurricanes that threatened his life. And just like him, we have storms that come into our lives. There's things that can happen in our lives, like maybe a fog rolls in and you're feeling a little, kind of lose your bearing. You thought things were clear. You thought you were doing everything that you thought God had called you to do, but somewhere along the line, because maybe you haven't reached that destination yet, or it isn't really adding up how you imagined, you're like, well, Lord, I'm doing A and B, and so it should look like C, but this looks like some other letter I don't even recognize. And so it can be disorienting. We can lose our bearing. We can lose our nerve and get discouraged in those times. There can be times when you feel like you might just be out in the middle of the ocean and you feel like you've been paddling for so long and you're just fatigued and tired and you're thinking, I think I'm at my bandwidth. I'm not sure I have it in me to continue any longer. This is really all I have right now. So you may just be exhausted and need a fresh wind. And then there's those times when maybe storms come suddenly and violently, something that just out of left field, you didn't even realize it. And that can really that can pull us like those currents just 200 miles south. Like, how did I end up here? That was crazy. And so there's storms like that in our lives that we're going to be encountering. And so what do we do in those times? When you feel like you're doing the right thing and you've been seeking the Lord, but something just comes in and it throws you off course. And I actually had a season like this. It wasn't a violent storm. It was probably a little bit a mix of fog and some currents, I think. But I was looking back through my journal just for this talk, and it was back in March I had written down, I said, I just feel like I'm under siege spiritually. I was discouraged, feeling insecure and unsure. And this wasn't a long season. It was probably a couple of weeks where I was kind of just feeling I don't even know if it was really one thing in particular. I don't know if that happens with you. There's just maybe something, and maybe something builds, or you hear something and it just kind of throws you in a tailspin. It was kind of one of those things. And that morning in my time with the Lord, so it's my practice that I'll be up very early in the morning while it is still dark and very quiet to have my time with the Lord. And it was in this time when I was reading one of the devotionals that I read, and it was actually Streams in the Desert. If any of you know that, I love that one. I've been reading that one for a long time. And the Lord just uses it so poignantly all the time. I love when he does stuff like that. So something I had written down on this day, through this storm, God is wanting to conform me into his image. This is from that Romans 8:29. I need to wait on God and abide in his will, knowing him, and then this idea of sharing in the fellowship of his sufferings. I kind of just felt like, he was like, yeah, I know this is going on, and I want you to just abide in me and just kind of wait the storm out. It's not going to last forever. It's kind of one of those kind of things. And then he gave me 1 Timothy 1:12, and that is, I thank Jesus Christ our Lord, who has given me strength, that he has appointed me to his service. And it was really kind of bringing back to remembering the call. When you get disoriented and you're unsure, go back to that last place where you felt like you heard from him. Like, what was the thing you were sure of before all this other stuff, before all the storms came and the winds came and threw you off? What was that last thing that he said to do? And I was like, okay. And so that kind of got me through. About a week later, when I was still kind of in the midst of this a little bit, and still really seeking some answers. And I, as my practice for having my time with the Lord, I use my iPad because it's the middle of the night and it's dark, and so I'll have that. I'll use it for worship. I'll have worship songs on YouTube that I'll have a little time with that, and then I'll have a time of prayer. And so after my time of worship, I was right near my sofa, and so my iPad was open, and I was on my knees, and all of a sudden I pressed a button. Is it up there? You know, when you press too hard, and you know, Siri's like, and so it's the middle of the night, and it's like quiet, and I hear this, "Go ahead, I'm listening." And it was a woman's voice, you know, I'm like, oh. Actually, it wasn't a woman's voice, because I changed Siri to a British male voice, so anyway, be that as it may. So, and then I was like so stunned. I was like sitting there. I mean, it actually kind of scared me. And then, you know, when you wait long enough, if you don't say anything, then the next thing she says is, you go to that next slide. "What can I help you with?" And so I just laughed. I mean, it was Siri, obviously, but honestly, I just felt it was the Lord just trying to lighten things up, probably like, "Shannon, just relax a little bit." So I just turned off my iPad at this point, because I was like scared I was going to do something else. And I was on the floor, just on my face. I'm like, "Lord, I just need to hear from you." I needed clarity. And it was actually it kind of came to this point where I really needed to hear from him. I really needed clarity, because I was really confused, because that A plus B wasn't adding up to C, and I was really wondering, did I miss you completely in this? Because it wasn't looking like how I thought it should look. And as clearly as anything, and this doesn't happen all the time, but once in a while, it's very clear. Well, he just speaks so clearly to my spirit. And I just heard him say, "Stay the course. Just stay the course." And I also sensed that your situation doesn't determine your destination. Sometimes, I don't know about you, but I can get fixated on seeing a result the way I think it should be. And that doesn't determine the destination. God knows the destination. But just being obedient to stay the course in that thing that he has called you to do. Hindsight is always 20/20, isn't it? And I don't know if you journal, but I'm so glad that journaling hasn't always been a thing that I've done, but I have made it a practice pretty consistently over the last several years. And looking past that day, I can see that God started to do some other things. Didn't necessarily change the thing that I was most fixated on, but he was starting to do some things in other areas that were really exciting. But I was so myopic and so fixated that I really couldn't see everything else that he was doing. So looking back, I just felt like the Lord was like, I've made this plan. I've charted your course. I know where I'm sending you. It may seem like you're going off in a different direction, but that's exactly where I have you going. You will get there. Just trust me each step of the way. He knows your final destination. He knows exactly where you are. You're not out bobbing on the ocean by yourself. He sees you. And he has provided everything that you need to stay the course. This is a great place to be, to stay the course in Bible study with women together. And he will get you to your final destination. Two things were so critical for me during this time, and it was prayer and worship and the Word of God. Through this study, we're going to continue to come back to the fundamentals. It's not complicated. It's really not complicated. It kind of comes back to the solar panels, right? When we position ourselves in such a way to be connected to Jesus, to receive the power that we need from His Spirit. He's going to give us the strength and the energy that we need to stand up again and start paddling and have confidence, even if we can't see the shores and you're still out in the middle of the ocean, you can trust I'm heading in the right direction. I know probably many of us have come into this room, come into this season with a lot of different things. There's a lot of women in here and a lot of life going on, right? Some of you may be in the midst of a storm. Some of you may feel like you've been blown off course, or that your oars fell in the water. You're waiting for someone to come along to give you an oar. You may feel like you're just bobbing up and down and you're just fatigued and you need some fresh wind. And you know, Antonio, as far as we know, I was reading an interview, he was the first person, I believe, according to this interview, that had ever paddle boarded